Linda?
A thought that you brought up a couple of days ago is that souls are transient things. And in order to keep your soul in place, you there's things that you do that keep your soul nourished and in place and happy. And I think working with plants obviously does that for me. I was sharing it with a friend this morning who's very creative. She doesn't consider herself an artist, but she takes painting classes, and she's very creative with her garments and her hair and the way she presents herself. And I said, I think, Lauren, this is what you do to keep your soul in place. And I told her about this class and that thought. And I believe actively, I hadn't thought about that, but I actively do things that keep my soul in place. And they're creative things, and a lot of them have to do with plants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I agree 100% with, I have to go out into the earth, into nature. Some people have to go to the mall or whatever and go shopping or get online and buy things. But I just find it so rewarding to walk into under a tree, or I never thought about it, but I guess I'm keeping my soul in place. I love that expression. It's very true.
Lynn, would you put Pat down so the four of us are in the gallery mode, and we'll just shift right on into our panel discussion, which I think we've already started. I thought I would start us with this question and give you a minute to think about it, and then let's talk about that. And then now, students, at any time you want to jump in and have a comment or ask a question or follow up, please do that. We don't want to dominate just because we have an official role. You have an official role too. What good is a teacher without a student? And so feel free to jump in. We've talked this week about developing relationships with plants and paying attention to plants and bringing that what we are learning about plants into our soul care and into our artistic work. But I'd like to ask each of our artists and students too to have a thought about this. What about the plant not as a subject of art, but the plant as an artist? Think about plants and what you know about plants. In what sense are plants artists, and what does that tell us about the work of making art? So who wants to take a shot at that?
I've grown vegetables for a really long time, and when I was a child watering the vegetables, I used to think that the architecture of the leaves was to direct the water to where the roots needed to have it. And like a beet, is like a thing here with the leaf, and the leaves would like channel the water right down to that big tuber or big root. And then other things that had leaves that were very ferny, I thought, well, maybe their root mass is correspondingly articulated in the ground. But I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I used to think about. And I used to think about how to water things based on what the leaf structure looked like. So
Neat.
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
Plant as an architect, that's I've not thought of that idea, though. I can think about vining plants and how they climb and position themselves to be able to catch the sunlight there.
Yeah, that's called nutation. And they curl. And I was looking for it. When I was in college, we wrote a book on the spiral form in nature about nutation.
Yes.
All trees are nutated in some way. They have a spiral. But it's all a matter of, well, scientifically, which we don't really talk about here, but it's like with turgor pressure in the cells. And so that morning glory that Linda had, we studied the morning glory for my book, and the humidity in the morning is greater on the outside of the bud. And as the day progresses and humidity dissipates, then the turgor pressure on the inside of those petals is stronger than what is on the outside of the petal. The petal outside is drying out and the inside is full of water. And so that makes that untwisting. And if you get the right moment in time, you can probably watch it happen. You know, I don't know if maybe you don't push a hairdryer on it and made it force it, but it was really cool. And also it's like twisted and it untwists and yes. And also the twist is the opposite down below the equator versus what we have here. So that's kind of fun too. And some plants, I forget what it was, the epilobium or something, it had a twisting mechanism to drill itself into the ground to plant its own seed. So there's a lot of cool mechanisms like that.
A lot of grass seed alms have that characteristic, so that when they fall, they fall through the air in a proper way to put the point down, and then as the winds blow, they twist themselves in, dig themselves in.
Yeah,
Very smart.
very smart.
The
Yeah.
red budgie by my back door, the seeds will go down and stand upright. And we used to have evening primrose parties where you would watch the get the pressure, the heat, the sign would build up, and people would actually stand there and try to pick out which one was going to come first to open up, like a horse race, but it was delightful. People would never observe that kind of thing.
4 o'clocks are called 4 o'clocks.
4 o'clock do that.
Open at 4 o'clock in some places. People actually make floral clocks with the plants that are going to open at certain hours. Yeah.
There's a plant, a vining plant called moonflower that makes a white plant, and it's twisted together, but just at dusk, they will open so dramatically that the vine will move. I mean, you can really, if you look away, you might miss it. They really snap open. It's worth growing moonflowers just to see that. They also have a very nice smell. Plant as perfumer.
Well, datura does that, doesn't it? I had a night blooming datura outside my back door at one time, and it's not real fast, but they open and the aroma is just intoxicating. And I found out there are different colors of them.
Brugmansia is like the one that's descending with a big like a Victrola horn kind of flowers. Yeah. But like Barb was saying, it used to be something that people were into botany before they had sports on television. But botany was the thing, and you'd go into your garden and watch things open, just like you were watching. But that was kind of in the entertainment back in the 1800s.
Right. And everybody sketched before photography. Everybody sketched. It was just a common skill. So people would put little sketches in their letters, or I guess I should say most literate people sketched. I don't know that everybody did, but they would put little sketches in their letters, or people kept journals, and you find some very nice work that is very artistic, because they didn't know that they couldn't do it.
Yeah. A lot of people were taught to draw also because they're drawing floral forms or articulated or circular things, because a lot of furniture styles or any designs were based on floral forms back before the Bauhaus started making everything square. But there's a lot of textbooks and it would be a class in school where you'd be learning to draw sort of fern or a acanthus leaf or something. I've got a couple of those little books. Yeah. So it was available to everyone.
I went searching. I used to sell a product called Pro Mix that had mycorrhizal in it. That is a fungal stimulant that's really wonderful. And if you just Google about trees talking to themselves, you'll find out that this is the roots and all that they do communicate underground. And it brought out a memory. I walked past, I still have a few things to plant. And I got this through the Watershed Alliance that I belong to up here, that tried to get people to plant trees and shrubs in their backyard and rain gardens and by wetlands and whatever. There's something been chewing on it, but this is a basswood, and it brought back a memory. I'm going to get back to the Native. I used to do a workshop on Native American mask making. We used paper mache. We weren't in there chopping things in wood. But one of the things that I found out was that the Eastern Woodland groups carved their masks. They had a lot, they called themselves the False Face Society, and they used it in all kinds of, rituals, that they would actually carve the face out of the living
basswood
tree, and I guess thank the tree for it, and take it out. And they found trees that they went on and survived. It didn't kill the tree. You hear about girdling trees, that's not good. But I just was always amazed with that, and it just brought, when I walked by and I thought, oh gee, I didn't plant that tree. And then I thought about the mask making unit that I used to teach, and of course the Pacific Northwest Native groups did a lot of really fascinating masks. I guess the Canadian museums up there, they've made a it's on YouTube, and it would be worthwhile for everybody to see. It was made in 1949, the legend of the loon's necklace. And it's like, it's an oldie, but it's a goodie, and it's the legend of how the loon got his markings, and it's a Native American folk story. So
it's not really necessarily art related, but when you talked about plants communicating,
that's how my mind goes.
Well, when you talked about plants communicating, I read something about grass communicating, that when a blade of grass gets broken, it releases compounds that tells the other grass around it that there's like a predator or something nearby, like deer eating it or something. And so the receiving grass will change their structure, their chemicals or whatever, to make them more bitter so that the deer stops eating it. And that's basically, that communication is the fresh cut grass smell. So when you are mowing the grass, all that grass is like almost screaming to each other to like make themselves bitter so that they get the deer away that aren't actually there. But I thought it was really interesting. And my parents had a dog that liked eating new growth grass that had never been cut before. And she was really good about finding exactly those blades to eat and not ever eating the cut grass, which then when I heard that made a lot more sense about why she liked the new stuff versus the stuff that had already been cut that was probably more bitter tasting to her. Which I thought was interesting. The communication in plants is very fascinating.
Yeah, that's really true. There's I'm trying to remember her name, but there's a horticulturist at Phipps Conservatory who wrote a great book about the interaction of insects and plants. And when I first started at Monticello, we had like 16 major insect pests, and I didn't want to use chemicals, so I tried to figure out how to use its own system to control it. So let's see, the potato beetle. It goes on the potato plant and starts eating like frenetically. And what I read is that the potato plant starts sending out a signal that, look at, I'm being attacked. But the potato beetle hears that, can smell or sense that pheromone from the potato plant, and it calls in more beetles. And so if you get one potato beetle on your potato plant, then it'll get many on that one plant. The next plant will be clean. And so it's not until they, dispense and they need to fly off to a new plant that they actually run down the row with the whole thing. So you can actually see a little swath of where they're communicating with each other. And so what we would do then was we'd take that leaf off and kind of like close that radio show down because there's no communication. And so we would control it just by clipping the leaves off with the bugs on. And then the insects finally got really smart and they were laying their babies in the heart of the potato plant. I was like, but we would like get those out anyway. So we had a lot of controls like that, because you knew that the plants were communicating with the insect. And the rise of bacteria, really cool. I had to talk about sustainability and textile dyes to a group. And that's when I studied bioremediating plants, because to see if any dye plants would be bioremediators. But those mycorrhizae, there's a couple different kinds, and they actually are able to break down the toxins before they enter the root, and they're actually able to regulate the incorporation of the toxins into the plant so the plant doesn't get overloaded. It's a fantastic network, and they only found it out with like electron microscopes because it's so incredibly tiny. And then the rain gardens too. They studied rain gardens because in Seattle, the local population was concerned that the children were playing in rain gardens because there's so many butterflies and flowers. And they thought, well, if all the toxins of the street are going into the rain garden, aren't the children going to be encountering the toxins? But they saw that within 3 to 9 days of an influx of toxins off the street into the rain garden, those mycorrhizae had completely obliterated any toxins that there were. And of course the butterflies are alive, but anything above ground was just absolutely fine. And just stay out of the muddy soil until it's done its work, and then you're fine. So that was fascinating to discover that there's really a scientific basis for what people were already assuming. So just thought I'd add that in.
That's a good example of the mistake we make when we think about things and separate. The plant is one thing and then the soil is another thing. But I guess we have to do that in order to understand and think about it. But the plant and soil are one living organism, just like we and all of our gut biome. We're not two things. We're one thing that depends upon each other. When we live with plants, and particularly in interaction with plants, that's one of the lessons that gets reinforced, that we are all in this together, and we take care of each other, just like the roots of all the trees that are connected through these mycorrhiza that serve many functions. If we took that away, we wouldn't have a forest anymore.
So when you plant a new plant in the ground, you want to make sure, like when somebody gives you a plant, you want to make sure you take some soil with it. Yeah. So you can do the translation there to bring those mycorrhizae along with it. Yeah. I plant tomatoes in hay bales in the garden sometimes, but I always go down in the woods and scrape up several handfuls of leaf mold and soil and stick, dig a little hole through the hay bale and stick that stuff down into the hay bale, water it down, let it sit and work. And then if you come back 3 weeks, a month later, and if you put your tomato in, that hay bale is alive with all of those wonderful things that it needs to make that tomato grow.
My father grew beautiful azaleas, and we lived in Maryland, and he would go across the road to a woodlot and dig up what he called woods dirt. And when he dug the hole, he dug that into the bottom of the hole. And, we had kind of a show place with these beautiful woodland azalea plants. And I think if it's his woods dirt, he knew what he was doing. He didn't know the word, but he did what he was doing there.
Right.
My grandmother Florence did too. She always wanted me to have a daughter and name her Florence, which of course means flower. And she's the one that I learned all my flowers from. And my dad was a Life Scout, so I learned trees and wood stuff from him. But my grandmother, even in her 90s, had that bucket. And I remember if she was doing this and the weather was warm, her stockings would be rolled below her knees. If she'd lean over to dig up that woods dirt, her apron would billow out and her dress would hike up a little bit and you could see she'd roll down her stockings to
Mhm.
work. So she'd
Mhm.
be a little, keep those knees cool. And
Mhm.
she'd come back with her bucket full of wood dirt.
Wow.
Yep.
Yep.
She actually she took cuttings from boxwoods, and I don't know how to do this. I talked with Todd Brzezinski about it. I had some boxwoods that she started, and they got so big, I had no room to walk on my patio. I just had to have 2 removed. And I tried starting them. A friend said, because she took willow and cut the willow all up and took like a 5-gallon bucket and let the willow soak in that bucket and then put some of that willow in with the cutting in a pot and watered that with willow water and got them started. And I've tried it. A friend of mine said, well, try a potato. Well, I got a beautiful potato plant, but the boxwood cutting died.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's certain enzymes in certain plants for that, that work. I don't think it's a universal thing. I know
Mhm.
you can just usually stick boxwood in the ground and it will root, and willow, pussy willow will root in water, but boxwood will not root in water. So certain plants, and I don't know what the essential element is for that. But I have heard about roses being taken out west in a potato, like the yellow rose. I think it's Hanson's. It's H. His name it has an H in it, but there's a yellow rose that was taken in the wagon trains in a potato. The cutting was taken west
Mhm.
potato. And
Yeah.
somehow that potato, whatever's in that potato, the starch or whatever little element it nourishes that rose. But I guess you could just lay out a whole lot of potatoes and stick things in and see which ones work, which works.
Mhm. Yep.
So along this line, I had this question about plants for basically Robert put all of us. And I was thinking about the reverence for plants that you have and how you have certain plants for ceremonial uses. And I was wondering if you'd had any that weren't considered ceremonial, but then I thought, well, maybe if they're toxic, they're considered ceremony because they're so strong. But then
Mhm.
I was thinking about um, how do you feel about plants um, that are like prickly plants, like plants that are offensive,
Mhm.
or do you find that offensive, or do you find that's clever on the part of the plant?
That's a good question. And I would start by saying that in the Muskogee world, the idea is that everything has its reason for being and everything has its purpose. And that even mosquitoes, as aggravating they are, even ticks, weren't for ticks, possums would not have anything to eat. That's one of their main diet items. Makes me appreciate possums more to learn that. So a prickly plant or even poison ivy, it has its place and it has its reason for being. If you understand it and you have the right relationship with it, you wouldn't lay down in poison ivy and wallow around, then you can get along just fine. To take that a little deeper, everything is sacred. In the Muskogee way, we talk about sacred ceremonies and sacred objects and sacred times and sacred places, but with the understanding that there is really no line between natural and supernatural, spirit and matter, sacred and ordinary. We just pay more attention when we use the idea or the term sacred. And place, for example, where we gather. When people gather over many, many years, it's like walking into a cathedral or a mosque or a gathering house, and you can feel what has accumulated there. And so sacredness is a heightened attitude that is a part of everything. And so one final thing about prickliness. I like what you said about respect the energy or the creativity of that plant or put that prickliness to work. I mentioned medicine, scratching with garjaws, but plants with thorns or prickles can be used for that same purpose. And holly, American holly, which you don't like to kneel down on or get in touch with when you're working through the leaves because of the sharp spines, is a medicine for backache. So you take a holly leaf, and you can get somebody else to do this for you. And on that, wherever you have the backache, take those thorns and scratch that part of your body with the thorns. Now, and it helps. Now, I don't know if it's something that the holly thorns are putting in the flesh or whether it's one of those just distraction things. Oh, now I feel the scratches. I don't feel my back spasm anymore. So, all of those are thoughts that come to mind. And
Is that a fresh holly leaf or a dry holly leaf? I have a very large holly tree in my backyard.
A fresh one would be better. But if it was wintertime and you couldn't find a fresh one.
Oh,
Or
sure you
hollies-
can. They're everlasting.
Yeah, evergreen. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I saw something about a holly that I'm not tall enough to be able to tell if this is actually true or not, but that the thorns or spikes on the holly leaf is in response to like things like deer eating the leaves. So if you're up high enough on the holly tree to be out of range of the things that are nibbling on it, the leaves are actually smooth on the edges, and it's only down towards the ground where they have the spikes on them. But I'm not tall enough for that. I haven't been able to look up at the top of a really tall holly tree to be able to tell if that's true or not. But I thought that was interesting that it's a response to the environment and truly a protective mechanism for the plant.
We need a little boy or a little girl to climb the tree for us.
Somebody, or a ladder. I don't really know what, but I'm not risking getting that high up on a ladder myself personally.
I've never heard that.
I had not heard that either.
I'll have to go and check.
I'm not sure how reputable the source was. I don't remember what the source was, but I now on the National Cemetery at Gettysburg, I know they have giant, huge holly trees, and I'm curious to go next time I go up there to see what I can see, but I'm probably not tall enough to be able to tell from the ground. But
Well, what you got to do is find a holly tree near a tall rock.
That's right.
I mean, I'm not really going to climb the little building that's there. I think I'll get in trouble for doing that in the National Cemetery, but but it has a huge, huge holly tree that's like tens of feet high that I'm willing to bet that would be one that would have the smooth leaves at the top, but haven't been up there lately, and I don't think I'm tall enough to tell.
I'm wondering if the smooth leaves are the young growth coming out and the older leaves have the thorns. So you'd
Could
have
be.
older leaves.
I don't know. The source made it sound like like if there weren't deer and there weren't things nibbling on the leaves, that they wouldn't develop the spikes at all. That
Yeah.
it's the spikes are a defense thing, that it might be the new growth as actually very I don't know, because I would think like down towards the ground you'd have, I don't know.
I'd also look to see how old the holly tree is in the environmental record and how old deer are, because they would have to have evolved together for that to actually be. I mean, I'm taking apart your legend, but
That's fine. I mean, I'm a little skeptical of it because I've never seen a holly tree that had smooth leaves. That the spikes are how I recognize it. So I don't know if I even recognize holly if it had smooth leaves. But
another investigation possibility is to take a stick and fumble around through the dead leaves that are on the ground. Because if there are smooth leaves up high, they should be dropping down and be mixed with the spiky leaves too. If you didn't find that, then I would be inclined to follow Pat's thought about the new leaves perhaps are smooth and the old leaves are spiky. But we have plant homework to do.
yeah, I just thought it was fascinating.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So
at that one particular spot where I know there's really tall leaves, I know that the ground underneath of it is well manicured. I'm willing to bet I'm not going to find enough holly leaves to be able to tell that with. You'd have to find a wild growth one to be able to figure that out. But I don't know. I thought it was interesting anyway.
Sana shared a note that she's looking it up.
no good.
good.
Robert, well, Pat brought up, this is Lynn, Pat brought up the FIPS, and there is a magnificent exhibit at the FIPS right now that I think everybody here would be interested in. It's a Highland Flora Project, Forage Plants of Southwestern Pennsylvania. And these are beautiful, beautiful illustrations of the plant. You can get it through the FIPS Conservatory website, but they have magnificent plants. And one of the artists whose work was accepted for this is Barbara Collins, who lives in Carroll County. She did the blue violets. So I think you would all find this very, very lovely. It's at the FIPS Conservatory, and the exhibit is called Foraged Flora of Southwestern Pennsylvania. It is truly beautiful. Highlands Floral Project is what it's called. Forage Plants of Southwestern Pennsylvania.
That's worth looking at just for the illustrations. You can see.
Oh my goodness.
Every
They're,
botanical artist has a different way of portraying plants.
yes, they're lovely. They are just beautiful. Everything from dandelions to ramps to prickly pear. Quite a collection of forage plants.
Well, maybe it's online. Are you looking at it online, or are you did you go to FIPS to see it? Just come on.
It's online, Pat. I'm sorry. Yeah, you can get it online, but also it is available if you happen to want to go up there and see it, but you can get it online. And if you want, I can pull it up while you're talking.
Yeah, maybe put the link in the chat.
Okay, I'll put the link in the chat. Yeah.
I wanted to show Heather something. I mentioned that leaves last a long time, and about, I think 40, it could be even 50 years ago, thinking about it, I made a collection of poems for someone by writing them out on leaves, and these are oak leaves. And so this is like a little book of leaves. And so you can see that the leaf has the poem written on it.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, neat.
See?
That's
Nice.
beautiful.
Yeah. So that's something, Heather, well, these are pressed leaves, obviously, to make them flat enough. There is one leaf that's not an oak, and that's, I think, a dogwood leaf here. So, but this has lasted a very long time, and I was really delighted to find it when I cleaned up my old house, and I found it, and I was really happy to see that. So I think I was looking for the biggest leaves I could find at the time, and I think this might be like a black oak.
Wow.
How wedgy it is at the top. And so that was, and then I got these other ones because they were pretty, and then I had to squeeze the poem in. Like this one, I think this is a red oak. And so you can see that the poem is very, fortunately, short words. And I get to the bottom and say, oh, I only have this much room left. Oh, like this one. See, it's like, oh, I have to fit it all in there.
That's really cool. I like the idea of the word count being constrained by the
by the poem. So here is your white oak leaf. Come to think of it, see how it is lobed and not pointy. So in case you want to find those, but look, you can keep them for a long time. So the tannins, I think, keep it preserved. Some leaves might not last, like maple leaves, I think eventually fracture up, but oak leaves will stay.
Thomas Sterner's new project with the leaves, with the poems at Frederick Community College. It brings, what you just showed brings that to mind. There's a picture of him online where he's actually positioning the leaves, and then there was a description. I can't remember the name. It's an alumna of Frederick Community College who wrote the poem that's involved with the leaves. And of course, it's an exterior metal sculpture. So any of you who come to Frederick for first Saturdays to see the show Pat and I are put together can swing by Frederick Community College and check out Thomas's poem of all the leaves, because they're pretty big. They looked a little to me like a sycamore leaf. They were kind of broad and flat, and he was underneath. They were bigger than his head, so it's a pretty good size sculpture.
How did he apply the words to the leaf?
I don't know if they're applied to the leaves or if there's some kind of placard, but it looked like the leaves had more than just vein decoration. I don't know. We'll have to talk with Thomas.
Yeah.
Go online, I guess, Frederick Community College, they probably have a picture of the installation.
Yeah.
Well, I found the Pips collection, but
a
they've got an
question.
underwater thing. I'm not seeing it. So
Huh.
treasure chest.
Oh, her name was Jessica Walliser. I should put that in the chat. She's got, and she probably has videos and stuff too. Let me see. Oh, here, over here. Jessica. If you're interested in the interaction of plants and people and plants and insects, Jessica Walliser.
Oh, Sarah said the Phipps Conservatory seems to confirm the smooth, spiky thing.
Ooh.
There's an article, it's in the chat. Lesson of genetics for lay people to understand the mechanism. Cool.
How about that?
I don't know that everybody wants the detail of the lesson, but that's the gist of it.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Never too old to learn something.
So that's great. Yeah. You know, I didn't
have
mention when we talked
Question
about.
about. I have a question. Pat, maybe you can answer me. Why did my red oak, we have about a 50-foot red oak out front that's always been very plentiful with acorns, not have acorns last year?
So the acorn is produced every other year. I'm trying to think of what the name
I
for that
never
is.
knew.
Yeah, generally, there's a good flush of acorns, and then the next year there will not be, and it's just some kind of natural cycle. I was trying to collect acorns for making
There was
acorn
plenty
flour,
buried by the.
and the year I needed it, there was no acorns, and so you have to gather a lot and hold them for the next year if you want to like make stuff from acorns.
Yeah, I was using them on, I was making kind of some corn husks dolls, and I wanted to adorn their heads with acorn caps. And I had to walk around in the cattle field there and found some buried that were from last, I guess the year before last, but I really didn't realize that they didn't produce full.
And it's not every oak, like it's not that they're all on the same schedule. You can find some that aren't, or different schedules, kind of like the way the cicadas are. You always have cicadas, but generally it's a big flush of acorns. The next year, not so much.
Yeah, I was just learning that too, that that I think it's some of the oaks do it like maybe every other year, but some of them, and I think the northern red oak is one that does it a little more randomly even. So it's not even and the idea is if they did it every year, there'd be too many it'd be too much of a big party, and then soon there'd be no oaks because all the acorns would get eaten because everybody would know to come to the party every year. I think.
Yeah, you get way too many wildlife, too much
Yeah.
wildlife.
I'm
Wow.
sharing the Phipps foraged. I'll just run through these. Can you see that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
wonderful illustrations.
This is Barbara
Oh.
Collins, who lives
Oh,
in
my
Carroll
goodness.
County.
Oh,
Who did
wow.
Wow, isn't that beautiful?
That's an interesting look at a dandelion.
Dandelion,
Like mine, Danny. Yeah.
Ooh, that's nice.
bergamot.
Yeah, with a moth.
Start up.
And this is a ginkgo.
Ginkgo. Yeah.
So this gives you lots of good ideas for illustration, like the way they've laid it out,
Mm-hmm.
and whether it's a black background or not.
Black is cool.
Neat.
Carol Watkins. Yeah,
They
You have
said the
ramps in
lavender
Alabama?
bergamot. A bergamot's usually red. When my grandmother planted the lavender bergamot, if it was too close to the red, the lavender would turn red eventually.
Hmm. Huh.
the dominant color in that plant. The leaves
Here's
all
the-
smell the same.
Boy, that's
Here's the
really-
beautyberry, which was the plant of the
Wow.
year last year for the American Garden Club. Isn't it gorgeous?
Wow.
Mm.
I don't want to. Look at that.
Wow.
Rose of Sharon.
That's artistic. Wow.
Oh,
Oh, the mayapple.
Yep.
nasturtium.
How is the nasturtium foraged?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how any of these are foraged, but they must have done the research.
At the Isabella Gardner Museum in Boston, there were the longest cascading orange nasturtiums I'd ever seen.
That's a special thing that they do. They have those like 20 feet long stretched out in the greenhouse, and they bring them out to hang them up for a certain moment in time. I don't think it's like persists very long, but yeah,
Mm.
that's phenomenal. Yeah. There's your passion flower. It's nice.
Mhm. These are beautiful illustrations.
Yeah.
Is this in
Yeah.
Pittsburgh?
Uh-huh. Yep. The Pittsburgh Conservatory. Look at that. Isn't that lovely? Mm. I think this is the last one.
Yep. It's Virginiana.
Okay.
Very nice. Thank you.
Mhm.
That's beautiful.
That's a delight for the soul.
Yes, it is.
While we have a little pause here, do any of our students have questions that you would like to address to the panel in general or to a specific person? We'd encourage you to do that now. We're about to wind down out of time.
I have a question for you. So I'm very curious to learn, how have you been preserving the indigenous knowledge of your community?
The indigenous knowledge?
Yeah, like the Muskogee,
Yes.
like traditions, like, you know,
Mhm.
like everything.
Well, part of that has been, well, I was a college professor for 36 years. And in the last part of my career, I focused my research on Muskogee culture. I had two primary focuses: the star lore about the constellations and plants, particularly medicine plants. And so that gave me an opportunity to look at those parts of Muskogee culture in a systematic way, and to write about and to publish not all information, but the things that were appropriate to share. So that was a part of my professional life. Of course, I've been retired for several years now, and I shifted my interest. A part of what had happened is I got excited about, found out I had Muskogee cultural background and got excited about the Muskogee culture, is I found teachers who would teach me. And I ended up serving as a medicine person and a ceremonial leader in several different Muskogee communities. So, teachers, old teachers never die. They just find something else to teach about. And so as I learned, I shared what I learned with one of my teachers. Said, anything we know, nothing we know is a secret. What we know is to be shared with all people who have a good heart. And there's some people I wouldn't talk to, but because they have some ulterior motive or purpose that is not coming out of good heart. But I've taken on many students, just as I was taken on as a student, and taught them one-on-one, which is the Muskogee tradition about transferring, and generally is the indigenous tradition about transferring information. You learn from someone and then you teach someone. I'm also involved in 2, sometimes 3 communities as a teacher And particularly with young people, though more and more older people who are coming late to their indigenous identity are as curious as children are and as interested as children are in learning and having fun in Muskogee way. But in the two of the tribal towns where I'm active, we regularly hold medicine schools for young people of all ages. And you know, we publicize these events and people are invited to come, and then I share information with them. One of the things that I do that is not traditional in many indigenous societies is I write things down and share those things in our tribal newsletter. I have a couple of books that I'm working on that I don't expect to publish in a general, you know, public access sort of way, but to make available to people in Muskogee communities or people who want to learn and honor about Muskogee communities. And I encourage students to take notes and to write their notes up into their journals or books. One of the traditions in Southeastern cultures is that a medicine person has their personal medicine diary, their medicine book, where they write down their experiences with plants and the way they make medicine and the songs that they use to empower the medicines. Now, that's not a thing that anyone would ever feel comfortable about publishing, but it is something you might pass on to a grandson or a family member or a student who has shown that they were really truly interested in Muskogee culture. It's a risky business. Passing along indigenous knowledge is a risky and difficult business, because you have to have someone who is willing to put in the time and to be committed and to be a servant. I've probably taken on since in the last 20 years, I've taken on probably five students that thought they wanted to go in depth to learn about Muskogee culture and medicine. And the one who was most serious and learned the most died early and was not able to pass on those. But the other four who along the way just sort of lost interest. But in the community that I'm a part of here near my home, there are probably 4 or 5 people who are really serious about learning the Muskogee way and being able to preserve it and to pass it on. So it has to be done in that relationship context. Writing it down in a book or a piece of paper and making that available to people, that doesn't work. I'm thankful that many people have written down parts of what they knew about Muskogee culture, but to keep it alive, it has to be practiced in cultural context and in a community context. I think that's why much indigenous knowledge across the world is being lost, because the communities that are there to support it are being lost.
Thank you so much. That's great. One follow-up question. So I also belong to an indigenous community, and my community has been going through like a genocide since the 1880s. And there's so much that has been lost, and a lot of people have immigrated. So we literally live all over the world. So
yeah,
because of that, people adapt like new cultures. So they kind of let go parts of their culture.
Yeah.
But it's coming back because the technology, I think, is making it easier for people to connect across the world, which is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I feel like there needs to be done more.
Yeah.
But it's hard, like mentally, sometimes if I go online and say something, there are like hate speeches, people like saying things that you'll be like, wow, like they would be like lying to your face, like denying evidences.
Mhm.
So what, if you were to give me one piece of advice to persist, because I'm running a women empowerment organization. We mainly work with people from my community, and we produce handicraft
Mhm.
items and embroideries. So
Mhm.
one piece of advice that you would want to give me to persevere on this path, what would it be?
Hold on to what you know and preserve it however you can, and trust that a time will come when the people who want to know it will show up. And then you'll be ready. And communities have a life cycle just like individual people and organisms. They wax and wane. I've been in indigenous communities that look like they would die next week, and then suddenly they flourish, and those people who hold that knowledge then have someone to teach and have a community in which to bring those teachings to life. So just holding on in itself. It's like there's a time where you're the seed, and the seed just holds on to all that information that will, when when the soil is right and the weather is right and the circumstances are right and the light is there, then the seed can flourish. So that holding on in itself is a very important thing. I've been taught by people who were living, and I've been taught by people who have died some hundreds of years ago, because they held on to what they knew, and then a student came and a time came where that community could bring that to life. So what you're doing is important, and it's worth the risk of somebody sending you a nasty note because they don't have anything to hold on to.
Thank you so much. That's very powerful.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a good question. Thank you for what you're doing. A last question or a last comment? We're just about down to the wire. Well, I want to thank Barbara and Pat and Linda, and also Lynn, though she's been in the background, she serves a critical purpose in us being able to do this. And behind the scenes, even further, Maria and other people who have worked. Jason filled in one day this week. So thank all the people who make it possible to do this. And thank you, students, for showing up, because if you'd not shown up, we wouldn't have been able to teach. It's just been a really nice week, and I thank you for it.
Don't forget the concert tonight, 8 o'clock. Last concert of the week, and when your works are finished, send them to Robert so we
Yes.
can have part of the virtual gallery for this week.